When you don't go to Geico.com, car insurance can seem intense. Like breakup R&B intense.
I thought you said you loved the sweater that I got you. If you didn't, you could have told me.
Geico makes it easy. Just go to Geico.com anytime to update or check your policy without all the extra drama.
I even had a gift receipt.
Blog Talk Radio.
There's been an awakening. Have you felt it? You are listening to Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be, and any of the time zones that you're in. We're glad that you made it here to Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie Mclean. I want to start off today's radio program saying that we're going to have a really good talk about ancient man and his first civilizations and ancient Black Americans, or Ancient Melanated Americans, as I begin to start calling them. We went through a lot of these subjects before on some of the other shows, and want to really start trying to get a little bit deeper into some of the things that we have to talk about in terms of who was here before Columbus actually reached the shores. So first, let's get into some news. The Zika virus hits Palm Beach. State health officials are investigating Palm Beach County's first case of non-travel related Zika. Governor Rick Scott officially announced Monday. In a new release, Scott's office said the person recently had traveled in Miami-Dade County, which so far has been the only county in Florida reportedly locally transmitting the virus. The Florida Department of Health still believes active transmissions are only taking place within the identified areas that is less than 1 square mile in Miami-Dade County. Scott office said, referring to the area that includes the popular Wynwood neighborhood of Miami. Well, I find that very interesting that you can keep mosquitoes within a mile-by-mile radius and prevent it from infecting anybody else. It's quite interesting how they're able to do that. So if anybody has any information on that, you can please give us a call. And again, our call-in number is 713-955-0636. That's Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie Mclean, on Blog Talk Radio. Another thing is President Obama has issued $743 billion in regulations. Since President Obama took office in 2009, the federal government has issued 600 major regulations totaling $743 billion, according to the new study from the Conservative American Action Forum. The Obama administration issued an average of 81 major rules, those with an economic impact of at least $100 million on a yearly basis, the study found. That's about one major rule every 4 to 5 days, or as an American Action Forum puts it, one rule for every 3 days that the federal government is open. It is 2,294 regulatory impositions on every person in the United States, wrote Sam Backens, director of the regulatory policy at the American Action Forum, who conducted the study. Very, very, very interesting in terms of what's happening there. Going over into the South Seas over there, China orders a military to be ready for North Korea missiles launch at any time. Japan ordered its military Monday to be ready at any time to shoot down North Korea missiles at the threat to strike Japan, putting its forces on a state of alert. At the least 3 months, a defense ministry official from the media said. Up to now, Japan has issued temporary orders when it had introductions of an immediate North Korean missile launch that it has canceled. Projectile had been launched. However, because some test firings are hard to detect, it has decided to put its military on standby for a longer period. The order will be reviewed after 3 months, the state broadcast, NHK, said. Interesting. Japan is still having some problems over there with their Fukushima plant, as it's dumping millions and millions of tons of radioactivity in the water. And, you know, they're preparing themselves for war. I think it would be better off for them to try to stop that nuclear holocaust that's happening over there in the Pacific Ocean and creating all kinds of toxic havoc on the west coast of America. It's just crazy what's going on out here in the world. But it's the reason why I read a lot of these news articles is for twofold. One, to get you to an understanding on how they're trying to program your mind to be ready for all the different types of holocaust that's going to be coming across this earth that they cannot prevent, because the current civilization that we're in now is going to be coming down. And a lot of these people do know that it's coming down. This is the reason why a lot of the elites are planning to get off the planet, planning to go to Mars. And so it gets into, you know, why we are talking about the ancient Americans and how it relates to us today. It gets into a lot of the different types of things that have happened in the past. So when you take a look at CNN and you take a look at Fox News and you take a look at all these different news agencies, have a really good understanding as to where they're coming from and who owns all of them. And they're all perpetuating the same type of information, and that is not only is it doom and gloom, but they're trying to perpetuate a race war, which they know is more of a spiritual war than anything else. The Republican congressman urge following the RNC speech, Cruz critics urge McCall to mount primary challenge. So they're trying to, Donald Trump is trying to, I wouldn't say Donald Trump because it's the people who are actually against the RNC and the people who are what they call the mainstream people over there, which they're trying to break open. But for when it comes down to what I call the melanated Americans, the only thing that really, really counts when it comes down to these kinds of news articles is what are we doing for ourselves and our own freedom. And I want to get to some of that news because it looks like there will be some sort of a UN resolution that will be coming sometime in September. And a reading of that resolution will probably be done either at the end of this month or in the beginning of September. So be on the lookout for that. That's real news. The other thing is that, you know, what can people do in order for them to be able to save themselves and their own community that they're not actually really free in a governmental system that they're not actually really free in. And this is another reason why we go through all the things that we're going through in terms of this Dark Matter radio program, whether it's of a spiritual, religious base to try to get you to understand that the nature, the true nature of what religion is and the type of religion that was here before the Europeans came over with their religion, and why, as a spiritual nature, we still find ourselves in the kind of situation that we're in now, even with all of the praying and all of the hallelujahs that we're doing in all of our churches, mosques, and temples. We're going to be getting into a lot of those things this week, actually. Tomorrow we'll have a special program, which will be August 9th. And we're going to have Nubian coming on, and he's going to be discussing a lot of these things in terms of the melanated person and their status and history on the planet of this earth. So that's about all I want to do with the news. Anything else dealing in the news? Of course, people are blowing each other up. People are preparing for war. Europe is not doing so well, and you know, the United States. We still can't figure out why the stock market is as high as it is. Oil is, as a benchmark, running around. Brent crude is running around $45 a barrel, and so, you know, with Iran coming back on tap and the oil sands up in Canada coming back up in full swing, there might be a further dip in the oil prices, but a lot of these things are to be expected because they are in the process of collapsing a lot of the different economies like they're doing now there in South America, unfortunately. So, interesting times we're in. Of course, interesting times. So I'm going to say that's about it for the news for today. So ancient man and his first civilizations and ancient black Americans. Sometimes we have to ponder, especially as you tune into Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie Mclean. We know that no source which insists Native Americans were exclusively the Mongolian or mulatto. We also know so well, like Geronimo and the like, except American television and movies. There you will find major representations other than the actual representation that were actually really here before the Europeans came. So like other sources we have to go to find out a lot of these things like the period of artifacts and scientific studies clearly show that blacks were the major component of the Paleo-American demographic. So as we begin to explore this, I want to get into some of the other ancient melanated civilizations that were around the world, such as the one as the Minoans, Minoans of ancient Greece. Yes, I said of ancient Greece. Archaeologist Manfred Bektek conducted extensive research on an ancient Greek civilization and on ancient Greek civilizations. He's one of the renowned experts of that. And their connections to ancient Egypt. Bektek, B-I-E-T-A-K, unearthed evidence from artwork as early as 7000 BC. Early people inhabiting Greece were of African descent. The Minoan culture of ancient Greece reached its peak about 1600 BC. They were known for their vibrant cities, opulent palaces, established trade, communications. Understand when it says established trade and connections. That means that there were a lot of civilizations, a whole civilization that was back then that had a very high mentality. They weren't just pygmies from the bush or savages from the what we now call, the West, us, or the Americans. The Minoans' artwork is recognized as a major era of visual achievement in art history. That's interesting. I took art history in college, and I didn't notice anything of the Minoans. Sculptures and free sculptures, from the Bronze Age, museums displays all over the world. Palaces in ruin indicate remnants of paved roads. So they had transportation. And when you have paved roads, that means that you had transportation is able to run on that paved road. And also piped water systems. Remember, this is far, far removed from the Roman Empire, who didn't come on the scene for at least another few thousand years. And it's very interesting that when you talk about paved roads and piped water systems, so they must have had aqueducts. They had a sophisticated sense of toiletry and bath houses, most likely, running water in their homes. And this is 7,000 before Christ, right? So a lot of what we have today is remnants on a serious culture that happened in the past. Another culture I want to get into is Indus Kush civilization. On March 2003, historian Ranko Rashid gave a lecture in Honolulu, Hawaii, about the presence of black people in ancient modern India. He stated that the face of India changed around 2000 BC when nomadic people, Indo-Europeans or Aryans, traveled to the Indus Valley and other fertile locations in southern India. Prior to the invasion, they call it an invasion. That's quite interesting because an invasion means that they were attacking and killing people, most likely. Blacks in India built rich and advanced civilizations. Now, when you talk about civilizations and advanced civilizations, you're talking about something that goes way beyond nomadic behavior and tribal behavior. Author Wayne Chandler recanted his amazing discoveries about blacks or melanated peoples in ancient India in his book, African Presence in Early Asia. The remarkable cities of Harpa and Mohenjo-Daro are only two of the many cities built by melanated people, black people in the story that says. These cities cover large regions of northern India and modern Pakistan of today. Wow. The Mahabharata, which is a religious text, was written some 5, 6, 7, 8,000 years ago. And when they're talking about this, they must be talking about when those Mahabharata was actually written as well, which is a ancient sacred religious text from India. So we have two very distinct civilizations that were perpetrated over here in Greece and in India. And then there's another one, which we're going to get into a little bit more today, which is the ancient Olmecs in ancient Mexico. The Olmecs were the ancient civilizations of the Americas. Think about that. Researchers such as Rashadi Ivan von Samanthia and Alexander von Honen have discovered and shared evidence showing that the original inhabitants of Mexico were of African descent. The Olmecs were no different from people found in Mendi regions of West Africa. That's not many, that's Mendi regions of West Africa. Best known for carvings of colossal stone heads that date back to 11,000 BC. More evidence of their existence before European explorers has been found. The Olmecs, and again, we have to go back and really get into that. And again, we'll get into that in just a little bit more. But the key word is before the Europeans come here. The Olmecs built pyramids, like structures, step pyramids also, made mud pyramids in Mexico. They were also very artistic and created terracotta art that displayed common activities like poetry, making of wrestling. To add to their achievements, the Olmec people developed a calendar system around 3100 BC. Interesting, because you have to remember those were around the times of the Mayans. And if anyone has been following the year 2012, the Mayans were a big part of all of that with their calendars. And come to find out that the Mayans are also a very dark-skinned race of people, along with the Aztecs that came after. And so when we get down into the civilizations of ancient America, we'll get into the Olmecs or the Zai civilizations. So let's take a look at another one. Shang Dynasty of ancient China. Now, we just heard that the Olmecs built terracotta statues. Terracotta statues are very famous in China, with the terracotta army that was found underground and buried with one of their great kings over there. So, in a generic study published in the Proceedings of Natural Academy of Science, generic, research found evidence showing that the first African arrived in China about 60,000 years ago. Researchers and populations geologist Lin Jin states, our work shows that modern humans first came to Southeast Asia and then moved later on to northern China. This supports the idea that modern humans originated from Africa. So as you know, the basic concept right now is that everything came out of Africa. Now, Africa, again, is a term I hate using because you know what it means if you've been listening to Dark Matter Radio. It means conquered people and or conquered land. Conquered land, and then after that, you put the name of the people that were conquered on that land. And so that's why you get the word African, and then you put the word American, and then you associate that with melanated people, or what they would call black people, and then all of a sudden you get conquered people that are black here in America. So the term Africa, Africa was originally, before that term came up, was known as Ethiopia, Western Ethiopia. So we can get into a lot of that, but just keep in mind that when you begin to start talking about the ancients, you have to begin to start using terms that were used way before they began to start manipulating the mindset of the modern man. And what we call the modern man today, probably anything really after the flood, but anything up into the Roman Empire, and when the Europeans started becoming on the scenes in all other parts of the world, other than just the section that they were in. Getting back to the Shang Dynasty in ancient China, a 2009 published essay from the Light Words from the Dark Covenant. The Light Words from the Dark Covenant, a collection of essays by Nibs Ra and Menu Amun. Those are some serious names. They don't sound like Chinese names either. Offers insight to early Chinese civilizations. It states that the first documented governance in China was headed by the Shang or Chang dynasty, 1000 BC. King Tang or Ta, founder of the Shang dynasty, was African descent. The Shang were also called Nika, which literally means black. Na. And Man Ka, King Tang, and the Shang dynasty were responsible for unifying China to the form of their first civilization. This is really, I mean, when you begin to start thinking about the Asian man and Asia, you don't think of it being populated by melanated people. But we're finding now in some really big spots, such as Greece, which is a main part of Europe and all of its culture, was populated by melanated people. And then we have India, which began to start changing its formation of what they look like around 2000 BC. Now we're looking at the Shang dynasty of China, and China, it's not a small area. It's a huge area of the world when you begin to start talking about the Chinese continent over there, so or the Asian continent. It's really amazing when we begin to start delving in and looking at what our true history is on this planet. I wanted to bring up also that they're always trying to say that man came from Africa and he was quote unquote African. And again, I don't like to use that term, but for the better of understanding where we're coming from. They really, I mean, when you really begin to start thinking about it, they have absolutely no idea where this dark-skinned man actually really came from. And I mean, they narrowed it down to Africa, but in most accounts of human history, you find out that this man just suddenly appeared on Earth. He didn't, it didn't evolve. There's no real evidence of that, although you get to the evolutionary theories and all that other type stuff, which is, in my opinion, complete garbage. There's something to evolution and the manipulating of people and all that other type stuff. But when you start talking about the melanated person coming from the beast of the wilderness, as a evolutionary type situation, I have a hard time believing that, especially after all the history that I've been reading. So in terms of where did this black man, this melanated man, actually originate? We'll try to get a little bit more in that in some sequence shows with, the show on August 9th, we're going to have Nubian come in, and hopefully maybe he might be able to shed some light on that as well. So let's go over to ancient Mesopotamia. Ancient Mesopotamia. Oh. Many scholars have concluded that the founders of the first Mesopotamian civilizations were black Sumerians. Mesopotamia was a biblical land of Sumer, which sprung up around 3000 BC. Now, if anybody knows anything about Samaria, which is the name of my one of my daughters, by the way, just love that name. It's just a name that just rings in the annals of time, and it brings great love to my heart when I say that name. But those of you who know about the Samaritans or Mesopotamia or Sumer, they're saying that this was the first great civilization that popped up after the Ice Age. And they're saying that it popped up around 3000 BC. But we found in the study that we're hearing today that the Greek civilization that was a melanated people that was flourishing, roads, piping systems, educational systems, they came up anywhere between 7,000 and 8,000 BC before Christ. And they're saying that the Ice Age didn't end until about 10 to 12,000 BC. So here we're starting to find some truth in terms of what we actually need to be studying and listening to when we're looking at all these things in terms of the ancients and the ancient man and his first civilization of and the civilizations and ancient Black Americans. So it's really important for us to really get in tune to what's going on. So when we come back after this short break, we're going to get a little further into ancient Mesopotamia and what the scholars had to say about that. So, want to take a ride? You're listening to Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie Mclean, on Blog Talk Radio. To reach Ronnie, log on to Blog Talk Radio, look up Dark Matter. You can reach Ronnie on Skype or through the number that is provided. Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie McLean. Welcome back. Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie McLean. Found live here on Blog Talk Radio. Our call-in number is 713-955-0636. And we are going to have a special presentation on August 9th. And we're going to be discussing a lot of things about black civilization. Ancient melanated civilization. And we'll get back to our talk here about ancient Mesopotamian. Many scholars have concluded that the founders of the first Mesopotamian civilizations were black Samaritans. Mesopotamia was the biblical land of Sumer, sprung up around 3000 BC. After deciphering the cuneiform script and research ancient Mesopotamians for many years, Henry Rawlinson, who lived in 1810 to 1895, discovered that the founders of the civilizations were Cushite origin. He made it clear that the Semitic speakers of Akkad and the non-Semitic speakers of Sumer were both black people who called themselves Sag-Gig-Ga, or blackheads. Let me say that again. The Samaritan peoples, they called themselves Sa-Gig-Ga, meaning black heads. John Baldwin wrote in his book, Prehistoric Nations, in 1869, the early colonists of Babylon were of the same race of the inhabitants of the Upper Nile. In other words, they were melanated, dark-skinned people with very, very curly hair. Now, a lot of these ancient civilizations that we're talking about have very, very curly hair, and the hair is not straight. So very interesting when we begin to start depicting the morphology of these type of people and their languages and what they actually look like. There was a corroborated by other scholars, including Chandra Chakraborty, who ascertained in his book, A Study in Hindu Social Policy, that the base on the similarities and styles of Babylonia. The Samaritans were of dark complexion, melanated complexion, chocolate in color, short stature, but of sturdy frame, oval faces, stout nose, hair, full beard, fully typically resembled the Darwinians, not only in Kranjung, but also in all the details. So there you have it with the ancient Mesopotamians. So it's really when you begin to start thinking about all of these things in terms of who you are, in terms of what we call a so-called Black American, who we are in terms of what people call African Americans, who we are in terms of who we are in terms of melanated people or indigenous people on the face of this earth and where we come from. So one of the things I really want to make it plain as we're doing this right here is that, as you just heard, the melanated people are all over the earth, everywhere, in every part of the earth. And and also coming out of what we now know as Africa. So anyone out there who is disputing that I'm saying that, there were no Africans part of the slave trade, or that we're not African or part African, what I'm saying is very little of our bloodline is from Africa. And when I'm saying the majority of us and where we're from are or who call themselves African Americans or Black here in the North American region of the United States, I would say 3/4 of us, 75%, if not more, of us are descendants of the original people who are the inhabitants of this land. And some people call them the Aboriginal Negroes of America. Some people call them the Indigenous Negroes of America, melanated, Black, whatever you want to call them. But we are of this land and of this part of the earth that is now called the United States of America, which is actually a corporation. So it's really important for us to, and again, when I say know your history, in order for us to be able to move forward and past what's going on and back into what we are supposed to be, because it's coming. Whether people like it or not, we're entering into a part of this universe, part of this galaxy where the energy levels are rising and vibrating. This is one of the reasons why that every planet in the solar system is heating, not just Earth. The vibrations that are around us are vibrating at a very higher and higher frequency, and will continue to do so. And this is why people are getting this, people are coming out with this term called the Mandela effect. And they're coming out, people are having a time of spiritual awakening. Some of the spiritual awakening that's happening on this earth is true. Some of the spiritual awakening on this earth is actually false and leading people into a deeper slumber where they're going to be lost and maybe even cut out of this new realm that is going to be coming upon us. So when we talk about ancient Black Americans and their civilizations, we have to get into talking about the Black civilizations of ancient America and the Mulan Mexicans, or from Mexico. And a lot of people call them the Olmecs or the Xi. That's XI. It's a gigantic stone head of Negradic African during the Olmec Xi civilization. So these are the guys that have they built those big giant heads. They look like big African heads with helmets on it. Some of the Some of the helmets are removed, and you can see that they have curly hair. But these are the earliest people in the Americas, who are people of the it's Negratic African race, who entered the Americas perhaps as early as 100,000 years ago by way of the Bering Strait, and by 30,000 years. Well, they entered by the Bering Straits, and about 30,000 years ago, in a worldwide migration undertaking that included journeys from what we call wet and lake-filled-in Siberia. At that time, Siberia, as you know, the Sahara Desert was actually a huge lake, was huge wetlands over there, and it was a part of the world where it was very vibrant. But there was a worldwide migration from these areas towards the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, and from West Africa across the Atlantic Ocean towards the Americas. And according to Goldwyn Thies, this ancient journey occurred particularly about 75,000 years ago, and included what they call black pygmies, black Germanic peoples, and black Australians, similar to the Aboriginal blacks, people of Australia, and parts of Asia, including India. Now, when we begin to start looking at this mass migration, we already know that there was when we just got finished looking at the ancient man and his first civilizations all across the world, we know that there were melanated people in China, melanated people in India, melanated people all across Europe, melanated people in Asia Minor, melanated people, of course, coming out of Africa. So, and now we also know that they came also from up and around the Bering Straits, and 100,000 years ago, who knows? Perhaps maybe you have to take a look at this. This is one thing I don't know. Maybe the Bering Straits 100,000 years ago was a lot warmer, and they were a lot more able to pass the difficult lands over there. So, recent discoveries in the field of linguistics and other methods have shown, without a doubt, that the ancient Olmecs of Mexico, known as the Zai people, later to become the Cree people, coming over from Mexico into the United States during the I call the Great Expansion of the Caucasians here in the Americas. These people came originally from West Africa and were the Mendi African ethnic stock. That's what they were of. That's what they're thinking that they were of. And again, we're talking about the guys that had the huge heads, the huge statue heads. And it cracks me up, because when you look at Ancient Aliens, and they show all these different pictures, and they show all these different artifacts, and they show all these different sculptures, and they talk about, these races from another planet, and then they go and talk about the Aryans, or the Palladians, and these who these people were. And it's almost like a slap in the face when they're showing. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like how maybe you were sitting in class and, me, myself, I can talk for myself, sitting in class in third grade, and the teacher's talking to the whole entire class. I'm sitting there with my arm raised up. I know the answer, and she just kind of looks over me like I'm not even there. And that's what Ancient Aliens is beginning to start to look like with me, because and feel like, because it's seemingly like they all know the truth about what's going on, but they don't put any credence into what the actual truth is and where all the stuff is actually really coming from. It's almost like it just, it's there, but it isn't there, and they don't even just mention it. So I get really upset those kinds of things. So the Mendi script was discovered in some of the ancient Olmec. So monuments in Mexico and were found to be identical to the very same script used by the Mendi people of West Africa. So I want to really make this point, that the Olmecs we hear when the Moors who ruled Spain and came over here and they were doing trading. And this is over 500 years before the Great Civil War happened over there, and rebellion happened over there in Europe, which canceled out the melanated rule, the dark skin rule, the blue bloods rule, and then they ultimately threw the Hebrews out. They call them Hebrews, and they also call them Moors. So there were two different types of dark skin rulers that were over there in Europe, but they threw them all out. But before that happened, they were doing a lot of trade, and when you follow the history, follow the records, the trade was being done with people in Mexico. And so these people, as you begin to start looking at it, as I'm starting to surmise, they must have been from the original Olmec or Zai people. And although the carbon-14 testing dating for the presence of the Olmecs or Zai people is about 1500 BC, journeys into the Mexican, again, carbon dating is found to be extremely unreliable or as reliable as they want it to be, which is a very interesting statement, because you find that some carbon dating seems to be bang on when they're dating something that they want to be dated, and then when they find things that they don't really want to be dated, they tend to start saying that the carbon dating isn't really that reliable. So when it comes down to DNA testing, I throw it in the same vein as carbon dating, because you don't know whether or not they're going to try to tell you the truth. And a lot of these people don't want you to know the truth. Now, I'm not just talking about white people in general. I'm talking about the elites. And there's some melanated people here that are elites that know what the truth are, that know what the truth is, and know where they're going, and know what's happening to this earth and what's happening to the people, knowing who's going to rise and who's going to fall. And we're in that time where a lot of things are happening. So when it comes down to doing a lot of these studies, if you notice, I use a lot of information in the 1800s or pre, because come around 1865, 1875, there were a lot of changes that were being done to the actual manuscripts of these people, and the hiding of the actual verbiage that was being detailed in the description of the people that were here of the Americas and all over this planet. It seems as though there is some sort of a cabal that wants to hide and not allow you to know, whites and blacks and Asians, of who and what you truly and really are. So, I mean, even though this radio program right now is dedicated to having a good understanding of where the so-called Black American, African American is actually from and what he is really about, it's also about the human condition and what's going on with all of us. And like I keep on saying again, even though I'm explaining a lot of these things, this is not about racism. Not about racism at all. This is about the edification of the soul and the rising of humans, right? The rising of man, the rising of beings, which are us. And the only way to be able to fix a lot of that is to make sure that we go back and we repair what has been done, not by the people of today, but by the cabals of yesterday and those that are still in power today. So we have to go and we have to do a lot of underpinning, and we have to do a lot of research and soul searching, and we have to get our ego out of it, and we have to not feel guilty about the things that have happened, because when you really start looking at a lot of these things, I mean, it can make you extremely angry. It can also make you very ashamed, because when you're looking at a lot of these ancient people, they were strong ancient people. They had a very strong civilization, very strong family values, very strong cultural values. They have very strong scientific abilities, very strong building abilities, architecture, and art. These are very strong and proud people. And some of the things that have happened to them in the preceding years, as some of these Europeans that came over here wanting war on the earth, a lot of over 100 million people were slaughtered, killed. I mean, you get some of the Polynesian people and their stories as to what happens when the Britons came over there, as to how some of the military people were sticking pokers up into people until they actually died. And so there's a lot of things that go along with this, but I'm not detailing a lot of the things about these ancient melanated people for racial war types, such as what some people in the media tried to do. I mean, a lot of CNN I feel is race-based. A lot of Rush Limbaugh stuff is race-based. A lot of Fox News is race-based. A lot of the radio programs and stuff like that considered, they call conservatives, but when you really look at the underlying stuff, it's a lot of it's race baiting and trying to pit people against each other and trying to down people. I mean, when you look at the Republicans and some of the things that were said on that stage, and some of the things that were said in the news, how they said that there was only one particular group of people on Earth that contributed everything. And, alluding to that most people didn't contribute anything to the earth is extremely disappointing, to say the least. And, so we as a people, when I say we as a people, melanated people, as their original state of being, are very strong, very powerful spiritual beings, and they're very, very, very peaceful beings. This is one of the reasons why when the Europeans came over here on this side of the earth had been at peace for so long that they didn't really require much military power. So they didn't develop a lot of the destruction-type weapons that you found with gunpowder and bombs and all those kinds of things. It was more of a cerebral-type civilization over here with very, very strong religious values in the worship of a singular God, with a very distinct purpose of taking care of the earth and taking care of the things that are on the earth and being the earth's watchers. So, we get into that. It's very, very, very important for us to understand that the Aboriginal, natural America's people are a mix of just about every portion of this earth that you can think of. And it's extremely important that we understand that. Now, I digressed a little bit in terms of what we were talking about, but it's important for us to really strengthen our spiritual, emotional self, so that we will be able to begin to start being the rulers that we were meant to be, being the people that take care of this earth that we were meant to be, being the people that were meant to go out into the stars and populate them, and to be able to cultivate other civilizations and to mix in with the galactic populace that have been created also by a singular God. And it's important that the Aboriginal, what we will call Negro Americans, Black Americans, Aboriginal, Indigenous Americans, Aboriginals, Indigenous, Melanated Americans understand that until they begin to put themselves back into that presence of Godship, their communities will forever be lost. So this is the reason why it's important for us to understand ancient civilizations, to understand our history, to understand where we come from as a people, as beings, and understand why we were put here in the first place. So as we begin to start talking, well, as we really get into, ancient kingdoms and civilizations, we begin to start finding out that they weren't just tribal. They weren't savages. They built pyramids. They built the mounds. They were the first mound builders. They survived here on this side of the earth with multi-different types of population, especially as the Mongols and the Mongolasians, they started coming over. And they had a very serious system of trade. And they had a very serious system of governance. And there's one of my things, that the pyramid structures and the step pyramids, I believe that they simulated an architectural type representation of their government and of governmental structure. And you have to remember, the governmental structure that is here in America is for the first time ever recorded in modern history, this type of structure. And this type of governmental structure just didn't appear out of the blue. Because remember, the other structures in what we call the old world were all king and pharaoh based. Over here in the Americas was something different. And it's the type of governmental structure that you see representing this world today. And I say this world and this North America and this Americas. So understand that when you begin to start looking at yourself as a melanated American, as an indigenous American, look at yourself as somebody who should be proud, intelligent, who is a representation of all of the engineers that came before you. Because when you begin to start talking about building roads, having water systems, taking care of your environment, mining copper, because a lot of the copper, as you begin to start understanding, came from the Americas and was shipped over to the old world, as we would call it. The old world did not have the type of copper to be able to sustain itself in the copper age. So the majority of copper came from this side of the earth, and that was thousands and thousands of years ago. But now, as you begin to start seeing that these civilizations that were all over the earth were connected in trade, and that they were very highly intelligent civilizations. So let us begin to start celebrating ourselves in who we are in terms of a great civilization here at this part of the earth. So, as we begin to start rising up and taking care of our countrymen, we begin to start understanding that we are the people that are designated to be able to take care of this part of the earth. So I'm glad that you are part of Dark Matter Radio today. I'm glad that you're able to hear this. Please take a listen to all the other podcasts that we have. We're on Facebook, Dark Matter Radio, Ronnie Mclean. Join, be a part of that. We're also on Blog Talk Radio, Dark Matter Radio, Ronnie Mclean. Take a look at that. So really take a look at some of the other things that we got going on. A lot of great shows that are coming. Thank you for listening. And catch you on the other side. Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie.
When you don't